And this is a science, okay? Now, once you do job evaluation, actually what you're doing is you're putting a price tag to that job. And how you put a price tag? Common sense. Will it fetch you the returns appropriately when you pay somebody to do that job? It's a very simple question from a business perspective. Now, who says HR people should not think from a business perspective? I think that's a myth, isn't it? So here tip number 4B, just reiterating, never encourage ad hoc salary fitments even at the time of hiring, because you might be able to close positions there. You might think you've got somebody in at a cheaper price, but tomorrow when the person comes on board and he notices that his peer level, his batchmate from school is paid higher than himself just because he comes from an organization that had paid him higher earlier, just imagine how much of disengagement you're bringing into this person whom you've hired. Now, the possibility is disengagement will finally lead to resignation. When a resignation happens, you're back to square one. And just imagine how much money you had saved. Apparently, you thought you had saved money by getting him at 30% over his 6 lakhs and not bringing him at par with the guy at 10 lakhs. But actually, you're going back to square one and count the recruitment cost. That's a very, very important metric. We normally forget to count the recruitment cost, which is the time spent by the recruiter multiplied by the hourly salary of the recruiter and all the other things that goes towards getting one candidate on board. Rather than that, if you're very clear about this is the value my organization puts for this position, becomes a whole lot manageable going forward. Right? So moving on, now this was tip number 4C as well. Never assume cost saving unless you can prove it in numbers. So very, very important here is, especially in compensation management, it is very easy to translate all of this into the metrics where you measure the ROI. It's a little difficult to do it in areas of employee engagement, because that's another whole chapter in itself, starting from definition of employee engagement. But when it comes to compensation management, I think it's very scientific. There are a lot of analytics you can pull in, and it's very easy to demonstrate if you're really saving cost in the long run. Never assume cost saving unless you can prove it in numbers. So this is how Anamika and her manager actually put up a compensation proposal for salary increase. They did thorough research. They planned out every single step so that they achieved it on time. And in spite of recession, they managed to give a fair increase to people. They did all of that only because they had enough research to support their proposal. So that was the situation number 4. Now, as Anamika and her manager together took on the journey, they felt that, okay, now we have put compensation we've brought it under control, we have made it more meaningful, we've tried to remove the bias that could have crept in and all of that. So now let's look at what do we do to create a training culture or a learning culture in the organization. So when they were talking about the learning culture, they noticed that their organization actually uses a lot of terms interchangeably. And it was quite amusing, and this was amusing when I was reading about it as well. There are 4 aspects which actually come under learning, and the 4 of them are teaching, training, mentoring, and coaching. Okay, all of them can come under learning. And very easily, all of us interchange these terms as if each one means the other. But I think it's important to know that each one has a very, very significant difference and has to be used appropriately. So just to give you quickly run through it is, when you talk of training is imparting some skills so that the person is absolutely consistent when it comes to repeatedly doing that task, right? So you train your dog to fetch a stick. You train a batsman to face a particular kind of ball, right? So that's what is called training. repeatedly performing the task in a way that you reach excellence in that particular task. Now that's training. Do not confuse that with learning. Now, what's teaching? Now, teaching is a little more than what training is. Teaching is how do you face, so in cricket, how do you face balls as a batsman? So that's how you teach a batsman. So there could be different kinds of ways the ball comes to you, and the batsman needs to face it, and that's what teaching is all about. So when you teach somebody about a task, let's say in a factory shop floor, you also teach that person that what all things need to be done before, after, during, and certain safety norms and all of that. So that's training plus a lot of other things. That's what teaching is all about. So when it comes to coaching, coaching is not the same as training once again. So when it comes to coaching, you do a lot more by telling the coachee as to what is it that you can anticipate and that could go wrong. So you coach somebody to play cricket. You coach somebody to take up a certain role in the organization, say on the shop floor. So let's look at those examples. Now, when it comes to mentoring, it's a lot beyond that. Mentoring will actually, the mentor is expected to teach a lot around experiences that he or she might have had, which probably the mentee may not even have to encounter. But as a mentor, you're supposed to be teaching all of that. So learning actually is something which encapsulates all the four: training, teaching, coaching, as well as mentoring. So coming back to our story, so Anamika and her manager actually figured out that they need to develop a learning culture in the organization. So they wondered how they should go about doing it. And then they spoke to all their stakeholders. They drew out a training calendar, um, and a lot of other things. And one thing that they also did is, they were, both of them were very enthusiastic to finish off things and get moving to the next stage. And in that process, they made a mistake. They actually thought that, we did benchmarking every time. So in learning also, let's do some benchmark. So all that they did in learning was they asked around in their various WhatsApp groups and their networks to various organizations and their friends, do you have a training calendar which I may use? Do you have a training policy which I may use? I'm sure this sounds familiar to many of us. These are shortcuts that we love to do. But let me just tell you that do not ever do these copy paste shortcuts. Every organization is unique in its own way. And especially when you're talking about learning, it's absolutely important that you understand the needs of every type of employee that you have. It's very difficult sometimes to get down to every single employee. Of course, in the training need identification, we actually do that, but never ever come up with something which is a copy paste from another organization, especially when it comes to learning, because every single individual could have a different learning style. And that's something which is very basic. So if you come up with modules which do not appeal to everyone in some way or the other, it's quite likely that your entire learning initiative could be disastrous. For example, if you focus too much on self-learning alone, if you say that all our programs will be through self-learning videos, so every employee is expected to go and do so many hours of learning. Of course, if you tie it up with the KRAs or the targets for the year, people will tick in the box how many hours of learning they did. But if you are actually going to evaluate what has been learned, obviously the results will be a big zero. And do you think it's really worth for HR to put in so much of effort and come up with something which has absolutely no effectiveness at all? Obviously not. So creating a learning roadmap starts with the question, what is kind of people that you're having to deal with, and what are their needs, and what is the organization's needs for coming up with a learning roadmap. So once these questions are answered, only then you can go ahead and even propose a roadmap and then start implementing it. And along the way, you'll have to keep making changes. So tip number 5 is never do a copy paste shortcut from another organization, especially when it comes to learning and the learning culture in your organization, because every single organization is unique in its own way. Now, very interestingly, now these were the typical major areas in the HR function that I've tried to cover by this story of Anamika. But there's one more observation which actually crossed my mind as I was narrating this story. The story is something that I have been drawing out of various experiences and various experiences of people I have met along the way and all of that. Now, these are all collection of those. One thing I noticed that wherever status quo was challenged, things looked different and things looked better. So tip number 6A is never succumb to pressure unnecessarily and learn to challenge status quo. I think that actually works. Many of the times we tend to get comfortable and we say that fine, this has been happening, so it should work. But never ever assume that it will work, because organizations are changing, group dynamics is changing, the market is changing, a lot of things are changing around. So if your organization has to be agile and adopt and adapt itself to the growing needs of the market around it, I think one needs to challenge status quo. So never assume that whatever has happened well in the past will keep happening well in the future as well. So tip number 6A is one thing is Anamika's role here was supposed to be that of a generalist. I didn't say that in the beginning, but that was part of her role. She was supposed to be a generalist. But she always showed a lot of interest in learning other areas as well, in the sense she looked at understanding compensation management. She looked at understanding how a learning system would work. She tried to understand how learning effectiveness is measured and all of that. And she kept going back to her manager with her ideas. So here a tip number 6B that I would say is never ever compartmentalize yourself into your job description that was given to you when you joined the organization, right? So typically when we apply for a position and we have made an offer, we have a job description with us. Now, please understand that every job description has a shelf life. So if you have a job description that tells you that you're supposed to be doing this bullet points, and you're supposed to be delivering this, and this, let's not assume that that remains with us for the rest of our lives in that organization. Okay? Designations may change in due course of time. Salaries obviously will change. All of that will happen. But unless each one of us is able to reinvent ourselves every year, I think the HR profession, that's where we'll start dying a slow death. Because if you are a machine, you have to wait for someone to build in that intelligence into you, right? But if you are a human being, what stops us from building that intelligence into ourselves each time and reinventing ourselves and coming out with a new persona each time with absolutely renewed energies? So tip number 6B is do not create boundaries and silos for yourself called as job descriptions. Try to break out of them, try to do different things, venture into trying some marketing. You can become a brand ambassador for HR itself, which is badly needed in a lot of organizations. You can become brand ambassadors for your organization by taking HR to a different level of performance. So that's nothing but marketing. So if you have marketing skills, you can absolutely do that to prove yourself. And last but not the least, 6C, I would say tip number 6C is, all of us have goals to survive in an organization, right? But my tip number 6C here is do not look at mere survival. See how you can thrive. Because to survive means to exist. Okay, so when you're just existing, life would become very dull and drab and boring. But when you thrive on something, you get to taste success, and you get to see where you are likely to go next, and that's how one can propel oneself. Now, I will quickly run through all the 6+ tips that I gave on what one should not do to be an HR professional, and then I will sum it up with a story, with a smaller story than this. Okay, so tip number 1 is never assume one size fits all. What worked in one place may not work in the other. Tip number 2 is never take any one side of either being an employee champion or a management representative. Learn to balance yourself. Tip number 3 is never go ahead with any proposal without keeping all stakeholders appropriately accountable and answerable. Tip number 4A is never put up any proposal for approval, especially if it involves monetary terms, without thorough research and backing. Tip number 4B, never encourage ad hoc salary fitments, even if you have to close a position on priority, because that is what builds in your anomalies in the system, which are very, very difficult to remove once they are in the system. Tip number 4C, never assume cost saving unless you are able to prove it with numbers. Never make that assumption that you're saving cost unless you're able to show it in terms of numbers. Tip number 5 is never copy paste anything from another organization, especially if it is learning and development, because learning has got to do with the kind of people you're dealing with. Otherwise, it could be a disaster. Tip number 6A is never succumb to anything that's been happening over a period of time and learn to challenge status quo. Tip number 6B is do not create boundary walls called silos within yourself, called job descriptions. Break through those and come out and explore other areas where you could be interested and you could build the HR brand value. And tip number 6C is do not keep goals just to survive, but keep them so that you thrive. Right? Now, with this, I just want to sum up with start with Why by Simon Sinek. It is so very famous. We all read it, we appreciate it, we do all of that. But how many of us really think on where we should apply in our HR profession? Now, in Simon Sinek's concentric circles, why sits in the middle, followed by how, and then what. Right? So, what is the outermost circle? Now, when you look at whatever an HR person is supposed to be doing as his or her job responsibility, what we end up doing typically, and to be fast and comfortably be done with, is we end up starting with what is it that the management wants us to do? What is it that the people want us to do? We start with the outermost circle from Simon Sinek's Start with Why, right? And after looking at what we think about how to do it, and unfortunately, many a time we forget the why. So one final tip is do not forget the why. So when you have to start something, when you have to do any initiative, when you have to launch a drive, when you have to write a policy, whatever it may be in the role that you're doing as an HR professional, always start with the why. Or rather, if I have to put it, which is related to the topic of today, never start with the what. Although it's very, very tempting, never start with the what and start with the why instead. So this was one last bit which I quoted from Simon Sinek. And with this, I would actually stop talking and let's open it up for a discussion. I'll be extremely glad if people in this call right now, one by one, unmute yourself, ask a question, talk about a situation that you would like to share. And that would make sense because we can deliberate on it as well.
Hello.
Yes, Prakash.
Yeah, hi, ma'am. Good morning. Yeah,
morning.
thank you. Ma'am, as you were explaining about two circumstances, one from an IBM company, another one from an XYZ company, where they both are coming to an organization. So we need to really map the compensation management between both the candidates. So actually, while we work in a startup company, especially, what it happens, we need to hire some good people. Of course, you know what people will have, right? The CEO will say, Prakash, I need a very good people, but the cost should be low. Sometimes I'm supposed to ask a candidate, unfortunately, can you cut down from your salary? So is it ethically right? First thing I want to know that.
See, yeah, so asking someone that, I don't think there is anything wrong ethically, because see, first of all, if you make an offer, it is up to the candidate to accept it or reject it, right?
Okay.
There is no hard and fast rule as to if someone for a particular reason might come at a lower salary as well, but it is that person's choice.
Okay.
But what is not ethical, it's not so much prescribed in India, but it is there globally. But I think it's a good practice is you don't really have to ask the person what is the last drawn salary.
Okay.
Okay? You might get to know it by so many ways. Okay? So, but typically it's not considered right to ask for the salary. This is still not illegal in India, but I think it's a good practice. So I would encourage people to follow that.
Okay.
Understand that when your management tells you get a right person at this cost, whatever, start with
Okay.
the why there. Okay, you try
Okay.
and have a discussion with your management saying, okay, what is the kind of value you're expecting in this position? So
Okay.
obviously in that conversation you will understand what is the kind of return on investment he's expecting.
Yes.
So when this person is, when your management is able to tell you that, you know, we need a person with this kind of salary range in this level because this is the kind of returns this is going to get and all of that, you will get an idea as to what should be the salary that should be offered for that level. Now,
Okay.
don't jump to somebody who's at a higher salary and is willing to come at a lower salary. That could be one of your choices. But yeah, you have a lot of people around. You might find somebody to whom you're able to give a hike as well and is good too. So do a lot of searching. Put a lot of effort in searching for the right candidate. That's important. That's really important. But the most important thing is your organization should have a certain numerical value which is associated with the position, and your offer should be around that. Not, it should never be based on what is the last drawn salary.
Yeah.
Last drawn salary could be an additional information, but that should not be the basis.
Correct. Here comes another question with relevant to that. See, say for example, if I'm waiting two of the candidates for the same position, whatever it is, I'm able to see that one candidate is 4 lakhs and another candidate is 5 lakhs. Okay. So maybe our salary band is between 7 to 8 lakhs. So how do we really offer an equal amount to both the candidates? So probably it depends upon the interview and their performance. But here the thing is, sometimes I get feedback that both the candidates are good, Prakash. Just go about with whatever the person they ask. So why do you want to match the band exactly? Maybe like the 7 to 10 lakhs. You try to close 4 lakhs people for 7 or 8 lakhs or 7.48 lakhs, like that. So automatically, if we have a band like 7 to 10 lakhs, in that I'm hiring in a person who are really equally talented for a different kind of salary band, right?
I got it. Right. So okay. So in this situation where your salary band for the position is 7 to 10 lakhs. Okay.
Okay.
Now you looked at both the candidates. Okay, and you don't have to really worry about what is their current salary. Now, the hiring manager will say that give a raise based on the current salary, but that should not be the criterion. That's what I'm trying to say. If your band is 7 to 10 lakhs, make an offer to the person who fits into that role with the competencies.
Okay.
So along with length of experience, that is number of years, and the breadth of knowledge that the person has gathered, also look at the third dimension in a person, which is called the depth, which is nothing but the competencies.
Okay.
Now, out of the two candidates, whoever's competencies are the best, which means your interview process also has to become a lot more objective. So you cannot take something which says that both are good, equally good. Okay. You have to probe in and find out. You have to build in certain objective ways of measuring the competency of the candidate during an interview. There could be certain parameters which you can put. Now, out of the two, whoever fits in best, make the offer which is within the band. And obviously, the band is a budgeted band, so that's been approved. So management should not have any question as to why you have made that offer. Now, obviously, out of the two, the best one you will make an offer. Now, if the person is okay with the offer, he'll come. Otherwise, you already have the second best in line. But the problem arises when we start thinking from their last drawn salary. So let's stop thinking. Let's stop our thinking process from that point. The thinking process should be, what is the value I have put for this role in my organization? Now, this is a very big paradigm shift. And I agree that you cannot achieve this overnight. But that's the endeavor that I am in. And wherever possible, I'm trying to build in this science. Right? So that's what you can't do it overnight. Correct.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. When it coming to learning and development, as you said, absolutely agree for it, where we should not get the copy paste kind of thing, because we have to understand each and everyone's skill, competency, and other thing. So I really have a question over here, because I'm handling two companies. One is a startup company, and while I was having a debate with my management, sir, we need to really train our sales executives on certain skills. Sometimes the management says that yes, we need to train, but sometimes the management says, yeah, Actually, they're not doing sales here. They're really very low at the sales. Why do you want to do a training? First, let them do the sales only, then let us training. So, in such a situation, how do I push the management to train our employees?
Okay, first you'll have to find out why there is a resistance to training. Okay. Now, if the resistance is purely because of a budget not being available, think innovative. Come up with methods where you're not having to spend money. There are ways to do it. How we did it in one organization is we created everything in-house. It was a lot of effort, but we created it in-house. So, you can start. I mean, it may not be a fantastic, extremely professional outsourced training, but you can still think of ways in which you can do things at zero cost.
Okay.
So think of that. But first, find out why the resistance is. The resistance is because of a lack of budget, or the
Yes,
resistance
absolutely
is
lack of budget as well as time.
See, time is something which people will have to create it, or you'll have to figure out which is the best time to catch people. Now, with technology, you can do a lot of things. You can create a lot of learning on the go. You can use apps for training people on very specific tasks. You can create all those things. You can create videos of learning. You can create learning chunks. All of this you can do in-house. So you'll not be spending any money out of it. You can find out people. Now, believe me, another thing which HR people should not do is don't assume everything you can do yourself. You might find other people in the organization who are capable of contributing into the learning and development repository of material. You can get them also involved in making this. So you can work with a 2-member HR team and do all of this, provided you're able to go beyond boundaries. That's what I meant.
Thank you, ma'am.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I have.
Yes, Vijay.
Yeah. If I understand it right, your example of IBM with the other XYZ candidate during the hiring process, if I'm right, you're also mentioning or suggesting that it would be nice to put the job value as part of the opening, right?
Yeah.
Let's say the particular position, the range is 7 to 10 lakhs. If I'm right, I think you're suggesting that you can put a job value, right?
Correct.
Are you saying the job value for internal reference or for outside people? Let's say there's a career posting. You are suggesting that to put a job value. Hey, this position, this is the range we are offering. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, you may not put the job value in your advertisements anywhere. You need not. I'm not suggesting that, because that is up to the organization whether they really want to be open about it at that stage. But at least internally within your team, within the hiring team and the compensation team, you should have a value in mind, so that when you're scrutinizing candidates, you don't end up scrutinizing someone who won't fit your budget in either way. Because many times it happens that, the resume looks a perfect fit for the role. I get this person, obviously because he's very good, he gets selected also. But unfortunately, his current salary is very high. He won't come at a lower salary, and therefore I go above my job value to pay him. And in the process, I have created an anomaly in the system. Now, how do I correct the other existing people? Then we come to a situation which is very common. I have been here for many years and I have not been paid, and the newcomer is being paid higher, right? Yeah. So to avoid that is, when you are scrutinizing resumes, you can have a fair understanding of what is their current salary. So if you find someone who's closer to your job value, and if the resume is a good fit, then that could be an obvious choice. It makes your life a lot easier. And it makes the life of the compensation person a lot easier later on, because doing these corrections, enormous corrections at salary reviews, even more difficult. Right? So you may not publish the job value everywhere. That's an organization's call. But internally, ideally, you should have.
Agreed. One more question. Probably this out of all this, the scope of this webinar, but it was running in my mind for a very long time.
No problem.
What would be the impact if you make the salary public?
Fantastic. I am waiting for that situation. It is, right now I'm associated with Ricardo Semler's Semco Style. Ricardo Semler is the author of the book Maverick. And one of the things he stated in that is actually keeping salaries absolutely public. Now, why salaries have become so very confidential and a matter of great sensitivity? Just look at that. At some point, such ad hoc fitments that we're talking about, discreetly giving somebody a lot more to close this position quickly, poaching and all of that has created anomalies in the system, salary anomalies. Now you have almost everybody as some outlier somewhere or the other, and there is no logical band which is appearing. You pick any organization, the situation is the same. Now, whichever organization I enter, the first thing I do is I look at these anomalies and I find anomalies on both ends. Now, because anomalies exist at both ends, because you have highly paid and poorly paid people in the same level, you are not able to make salaries public. Now, imagine a situation. Now, this is an ideal situation. It is very difficult to happen, but just imagine a situation where every level, every position has a band. If it has a band, it's as good as making it public. Right? So at least if we move towards making compensation management scientific and transparent, at least to the individual, to the hiring manager, as to why we are paying somebody X salary, we will soon reach a day where we can make salaries transparent. In Government of India, salaries, pay scales are still transparent. It comes in their advertisement.
Yes.
Because they have a scale and a band. It's
No, I
only
agree.
when we start jumping, yeah, we are in this mess.
No,
But
I
it will
agree.
be good. It will be good. Like, I have tried this in small teams in some organizations where I have worked, and it has not been a problem as long as you're able to explain everyone why he or she is paid so much vis-a-vis compared to the others. If you're able to explain that with transparency, it can happen.
Yeah, thank you so much. I like it.
So by my watch, we are exactly at 12. Maybe I can take one question if anyone has.
No, and by the way, just want to finish off with one good thing. I really like the the one. I mean, my takeaway is not based on lost count salary, because all the recruiters are being influenced by what the candidate is getting. I think that is not making them creative, and they are forced to solve the problem within that framework. But
Correct.
if they take out that not based on lost on salary, I think that would be a great.
Absolutely.
That's a great way to pay payout for us.
Very, very valid point. Now, when I published the topic for today, saying what one should not do to be a HR pro, many people came back and told me it should be an HR pro. So I said I did that deliberately because I really want to close this conversation with why I wrote a HR pro is I want each one of us on this call at least to read HR as human resource. Okay, so what one should not do to be a human resource pro. So let's not forget the human behind the human resource function. Right? So let's start dealing with people with a lot more empathy. Let's start dealing with organizations also with empathy and more accountability. Because we are all worried that the bots will take over the HR profession. HR will become redundant in 2020 and so on and so forth. A lot of senior people in the fraternity also have been talking about it, but that's all because we read HR as HR and we forget that there is a human within that. So let's just focus on being a lot more human. So with that, I would just wind up because it's noon and it's Saturday and some of us are at home and some of us need to get back to work. Just one thing I would want everyone in this call to do is, connect with me on LinkedIn. You can keep reading whatever small stories that I post under hashtag HS Express, and feedback on this 1 hour. I'll be very happy if you can share it as LinkedIn comments on the post, the invitation post which came from Caledon Tech on LinkedIn, because I'm open to comments which are public. So that'll be a way where I can do better next time. So thanks a lot, Gayatri and Caledon Tech team for this wonderful interaction. I love my Saturdays when I'm with the HR fraternity. So made my day. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great session. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, and stay in touch, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.